sports. We'll cover some other topics as well. We're excited for this one. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast.
From Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network, you're listening to the Sports Stove podcast with your host, Vince Stover.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up in me?
Welcome into an all-new edition of the Sports Stove podcast presented by In the Clutch. In the Clutch has officially licensed apparel for Major League Baseball, Major League Baseball Players Association, NFL, National Hockey League, and all kinds of other things. Go to intheclutch.com, use the code SPORTSSTOVE, get 10% off your purchase. Dad, we have a great show lined up, and good to have you back with us, by the way, Dad. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, good to be here. I'm really excited about this one. This will be great.
All right, well, let's bring in our guest. We don't want to leave him waiting too long. He's trying to watch some baseball tonight, so we're going to bring in George Plaster. He's a Tennessee Radio Hall of Famer. He's the host of the all-new George Plaster Show, Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 on Mainstream Media TV, which you can find on your Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV starting July the 11th. George, it is a real honor to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Oh, happy to do it. Hope you guys are doing well.
We're doing great. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about my childhood today, getting ready for you coming on. And one of the reasons why I am doing the show is because I grew up in the car with Dad listening to George Plaster between Murfreesboro and Nashville. Every time I hear it, was it Van Halen's Jump, I think was your
absolutely
song? Yeah. So I remember anytime that comes on, I think George Plaster, I think childhood memories. And then I actually used that song for my first ever live sports show, halftime show during high school football on the radio. I used that song as my intro, as an ode to my childhood. So I really do appreciate you coming on. Tons of memories listening to your voice throughout my childhood. And of course, Dad was involved with that as well. Dad, you won cookies, I think, listening to George's show, or a trivia question or something like that sometime.
I did. There was a trivia question about Stump George. He did that for just a little while, and I asked a brave question and actually won. So,
do you remember the question?
It was, what baseball player was the first one to get as a write-in vote in the All-Star game? When they first started the write-ins back in the 70s, the first player to get in as a write-in, and it was a Brave.
Rico Carty?
Rico Carty is who it was.
Was it really? Oh, yeah. We're cooking with gas.
Now we got to send George some cookies. He got the question right. Yeah, George, I want to talk to you about Nashville sports, because Nashville, which is where you're at, it has just become one of the top sports cities in America, it seems like right now. And I mean, back before the Titans came, we always had the Sounds, or for a long time we had the Sounds, and we had the Nashville Knights hockey there for a little bit as well. But it seems like right now, when people think of Nashville, one of the things they think of is sports, compared to in the past when it was only music. Sports is a big part of that now. What is the cause for that boom of Nashville as a sports city?
Phil Bredesen. If to put it in, a really quick answer, he was the one that had the vision to say we need a downtown arena. He was the one who took the chance that Bud Adams might actually be for real, because Bud Adams had been shopping the Oilers around. Jacksonville was one of the cities. There'd been some others. Bredesen had a vision to him as a mayor in the mid-90s that nobody else had. And without him, even though he was not some big hardcore sports fan, none of this would have ever happened.
Do you think that what Nashville currently is fits that vision, fulfills that vision that Bredesen had?
That's a great question. It probably has gone a little past that. The Titans in the first year of the then new stadium go to the Super Bowl. Nobody could have seen that coming. The Predators attracted a level of passion when they made the run to the Stanley Cup that probably nobody saw coming. So the real answers to it are, it's probably surpassed what we all thought.
I look at what it is now. Now the tight ends meet in Nashville every year for their tight end university, and it's becoming again just a place for people are living now. Right, off-season athletes, celebrities are all moving to Nashville. It seems like some of that might be the stuff that goes on in California has pushed them this way, but and others it's a very attractive place to be. And the Titans have been a big part of that. How far have the Titans come? I mean, when they came in. That first couple of years, people liked them, people supported them. But what was it? Was it the Super Bowl run that actually drew all the major support, or where are they now compared to where they were in the late '90s?
Well, I don't think it's anywhere near fan base wise what it was back then. Jeff Fisher and a group of players that were starved for attention really got out in this community, and the public. The community loved them. I don't think that exists right now to any great extent. I think they've lacked a little bit of you've had a couple of quarterbacks that really have not been deep into the community. Marcus Mariota might as well have been, in some sort of a cave when he was here. Nobody ever saw him. And frankly, Ryan Tannehill has not been overly visible in this city. And I think when your quarterback isn't, I think it hurts you. I'm not saying it necessarily affects how many people you draw, but I don't think it helps at all.
Dad, you always kind of accredited some of the less fandom to the Derek Mason move, didn't you?
Well, I think that was that hurt the Titans. I don't believe they were ever quite the same team after they got rid of Derek Mason from there. And again, that may have hurt in the community also. So,
excuse me, I know y'all are wondering what I'm doing. I'm trying to get a phone charger that doesn't seem to want to help me at all to work. So. And then you'll hear people say, well, George is not exactly the most technologically solid. So the two combined, y'all are talking to a moving target. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. When Derek Mason was let go, Dad said that for a long time. It has a major role in where the program has gone for the Titans. When they chose not to bring back Derek Mason to let him walk. Of course, that was around the same time as McNair left and all that kind of stuff too. But that was the heyday, right? The McNair, Derek Mason, Eddie George days. That was kind of the heyday. Obviously, they went to the Super Bowl, so that'd be a big part. But even the first couple of Vince Young years were pretty incredible.
They got themselves into a salary cap mess where they really didn't have any choice. And they made the decision, as a lot of teams did back then, to play it out, to try to go one more year because they felt like they really had a shot. It didn't work out, and that's what your dad was referencing when Derek Mason and Steve McNair ended up being gone the same day. That was kind of a Black Monday in Titans history.
Yeah. Steve was very impactful in Nashville. People absolutely loved him, McNair, and his passing was felt very hard. It felt like in that community as well. When you look back at those years and now, the access you had to players and coaches, or the relationship, maybe be the better word for it, you had with players and coaches, would you say it was as good as it is now, better than it is now? What kind of access did they give you, especially in those good early years?
It was light years better. It's not even close now. And a lot of that has to do with COVID and Zoom interviews and all that kind of stuff. You very seldom get one-on-ones anymore. A lot of those guys that came here at the beginning, I formed some really good friendships. Steve McNair, Eddie George, Derek Mason, were all guys, Blaine Bishop, that I considered friends. Peter Sermon, Drew Bennett. I could give you a long list of them. Those were some great guys. That's the best locker room that I have ever covered. And I always tell those guys, y'all were incredible to deal with. There was virtually nothing that I asked for as far as going to players and saying, would you come on this show? Would you come over to the Wild Horse, whatever, that they didn't help me. They were incredible.
Now, I cover Eastern Kentucky University and been really fortunate. The university's been great to me and letting me in, and coaches have been great, players have been great. One of the things I always think back to that my dad said as a kid when he talked about you, George, was it seemed like the local media really pandered to Jeff Fisher. And Dad always said that you were the one person who didn't. It wasn't that you were ever mean to Jeff Fisher, but you were willing to speak the truth, whether it hurt his feelings or not. I don't know if you on purpose did that, what kind of the behind the scenes aspect of this, but how do you balance having a sports show that's not just sucking up so you can have that relationship versus actually being able to talk real live what's going on?
Yeah, it's a fine line. I mean, Jeff and I are, I believe, very good friends today. I helped him with a big charity event last summer for the Heimerdinger Foundation. The way I used to say it, I knew that Jeff respected what I was doing. I very much respected what he did. And I always believed that he was probably the only coach that could have taken all the buffoonery in the late 90s, you know, working out of a trailer, dealing with buds, penny pinching. He's probably the only guy that could have navigated that. We're lucky that it was Fisher back then. And I think he knew that I felt that way. We got into it at times over Pac-Man. That was probably our worst go at it. You know, I kept telling him, your little angel is no angel. And, you know, that caused some stuff. That was really the biggest thing he and I got into.
Yeah, Pac-Man Jones was an interesting case. You know, talent versus off the field stuff, and even now he seems like he's doing well. I don't know. I don't see him much about him anymore, other than his recent taking care of some kids, friends, children, and stuff like that. And so now that's come up again. But he kind of, do you think he ever turned things around? Because it seems like the end of his career, he wasn't getting in trouble, at least that we heard of.
Yeah, I hope not. He was an incredible talent, and a lot of it was wasted. He ran through a bunch of money very early in his career. It was just kind of a sad deal. I hope it's turned out well for him. I really do.
I've got more questions, but Dad, I know you probably have some questions too, so I'll let you ask a couple.
Well, I got a couple. One, when I was there, you know, in the area for about 40 years, there was just some great sports personalities there. I think of John Merritt, Boots Donley, Kermit Davis, Pete Weber, and several. George, who would you think is one of the biggest sports personalities that you've covered there in the area or got to know?
Obviously, for me, C.M. Newton, who was like a second dad to me, was one of those. Big John, John Merritt you're referring to, there's a guy that was larger than life. I think it was fortunate that the NCAA didn't seem to swoop in on Tennessee State back then. I'm not sure how much they were into complying with rules. You know, Boots is still here. I see Boots at breakfast. A group of us get together. Larry Schmittou was another one, a great personality, you know, at that time. So you're right. We were blessed with not only some really good sports people, but some real personalities.
Hey, to follow up with that, who was your least favorite? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Dan.
That's it. Got a Predator question. Of course, you people may not know that you're one of the people very much responsible for the Predators still being in Nashville with that big season ticket sale over that weekend there. But I had a chance to go, and Vince went with me several times to Predator games. I was fortunate enough to get to go to 2 or 3 or 4 every year when I was there. And I was able to go to the first playoff game series when they played the Red Wings. And I was there to be able to be there at the second game. Of course, they got their first playoff victory at the first one, but that night was the first shutout, I believe, in playoff history for the Predators. And the last 2 minutes of that game, I have never been in a live sporting event as loud and as electric as that was. And I know you've been to hundreds and hundreds of Predator games. What would be a game or a moment that would stick out to you?
Let me ask this first. Am I causing all the crackling
I believe so.
in the background?
I think so.
Okay, let me see what I can do. I apologize
That's okay.
for what I'm causing here. I've got about 35% stuff, so bear with me on this.
Okay.
The night they beat Anaheim to get to the Stanley Cup final, when they brought the team back out on the ice to the music, whatever it was, Glorious Domination. Several of us who had been involved in that rally, I know were moved to near tears because we fought our butts off during those 2.5 months to see to it that this team would stay here, and to watch all of it come to fruition. You know, you think a year later, Seattle, which was a great city supporting the Supersonics, they couldn't pull off what we did. And, you know, I've always felt like we were really fortunate. That was a really emotional moment. I'm a day one season ticket holder. I didn't know the first damn thing about hockey when they got here. But about 4 years in, it finally hit for me. And then when you put in the kind of efforts that all of us in the Our Team Nashville group put in, you tend to want to care a little bit more at that point. Is this any better, by the way?
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Okay. Sounded like a thunderstorm for a while.
All right, Vince, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to go back to the Preds. The sale announced here recently. You had some good stuff on social media about that. You thought it was a good thing, the ownership that would be coming into the Nashville Predators. And it was a far different story than the last time they were up for sale, right?
Oh, God. Yeah, the deal all those years ago, I knew, or at least I thought I knew, the minute I heard Canadian businessman Jim Balsillie, I knew we were in trouble. I was actually I was at Turner Field to see the Braves and the Mets. And Butch Spiriton, who runs the Convention and Visitors Bureau here, called me and said, Leopold has sold the team. I called Willie and Darren. They were on the air. I was on vacation. And I told him, I said, we're in big trouble. And on the way back, I remember thinking, what could I do to help? And little did I know that 48 hours later, Butch and Ralph Schultz, who runs the Chamber of Commerce here, they decided to put a group together. And before I knew what hit me, I was one of the ringleaders in that deal. I'm glad I was stupid enough to not know what I was getting into.
Oh, that's great. That's great. George, I know we got your phone's dying, so we don't want to keep you too much longer. But you do have a new show coming on. You're going from radio to TV. It's Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 on Main Street Media TV. You can get that on Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV. Starts July the 11th. And now you go from hearing the golden voice of George Plaster to seeing the face of George Plaster on a daily basis.
Thunderstorm right now. Okay, maybe that got better there. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I'm going to transition into sort of a little bit of what y'all are doing, which is sports talk radio on television. Now, I think I might be better off putting a paper bag over my head. That might help it, but I'm really excited about it. This is going to be a fun venture for me. This late in my career, I'm not sure I ever thought I would have this much fun, but putting this together it's been a blast.
Well, George, thank you for coming on. It means the world to us. And sorry about some of the audio issues, but we'll catch up with you sometime down the road. Thank you so much for being on with us today.
Listen, I am so sorry.
It's okay.
I know you all had some good plans with this, and I have ruined it with what sounds like a thunderstorm in the area. So, give me a holler back. Here's a good line. Give me a rain check.
There you go. All right, George. Good luck with the TV show, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you. I am so sorry that this hadn't worked out better.
No problem. Thank you so much. We do appreciate it.
Thanks for being on.
All right. That's George Plaster again, Mainstream Media TV. You can get that, download that on Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV. The show starts July the 11th, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. And you'll love listening to George. He is a great host and does a great job there in Nashville, but talking about other things as well. So thank you to George Plaster. And I don't know. I didn't have as bad of audio issues till the end there as what he was having. So Dad, I don't know how it sounded on your end. I'll listen back to it, I guess, when we post the show. But there was some great stuff in that interview, Dad. Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, not active in the community. That surprised me, especially about Tannehill. So that was surprising. Some good stuff about Jeff Fisher in there. The hockey sale was awesome as well. And absolutely loved having George on. We'll work to get him on again. He was, we're on Eastern time. He was Central time. I had a little confusion with that. So he was at the minor league baseball stadium talking to us tonight. And, but George, phenomenal. Absolutely loved it. Thank you to George Plaster for coming on this show. Dad, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll talk some more sports after this word from intheclutch.com. InTheClutch.com, the newest sponsors of the Sports Stove podcast, and we are excited to partner with InTheClutch.com. They have officially licensed apparel and accessories for your favorite sports teams and athletes. Use code SPORTSSTOVE and get 10% off your first purchase. You can find shirts like I Still Own You, Green Bay Packers. Are we talking about practice? All kinds of great shirts in baseball, football, hockey, and basketball. Officially licensed apparel from InTheClutch.com. Again, use the code SPORTSSTOVE to get 10% off your purchase. Welcome back into the Sports Stove podcast, and we and Dad are going to finish up the show here talking about some things. There's a lot of basketball news going on right now. We're going to hold off on that till Sunday, and we'll have a guest on Sunday to talk about the NBA and all that stuff. So we will talk about it, but we're going to wait till Sunday. James Harden optioned out of his player option with the Philadelphia 76ers. Beal also went optioned out of his player option with the Wizards. We'll see where all that leads to. The Hawks trade to get an all-star guard to add to their backcourt as well. Let's talk, though, about Emoni Bates, Dad. Number 1 overall recruit, signed with Penny Hardaway and Memphis last year. It did not go well. And so he enters the transfer portal, and he signs with Eastern Michigan. An interesting decision from last year he was the number 1 high school recruit coming into college. And now he's going to Eastern Michigan. No knock to Eastern Michigan, but that doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, I mean, I was really surprised about that. Be interesting to see how that goes with different players. You know, we talked about Eastern Kentucky have a great recruiting year and some really big name players going there. And obviously, I think you and I talked about it the other day that, you know, a really good player can go to a smaller school like that, or I guess with a lesser conference, not necessarily a smaller school, and they can really stand out and be noticed there. So, but again, you would think it was kind of good to see, because with all the NIL stuff, you know, I wouldn't think that factored into the decision at Eastern Michigan. And, you know, it's great to see, you know, him go where he thought he had a good opportunity to do well. So, yeah, again, you know, we've talked about all this with the NIL and different things, and I think it'll be a few years before everything kind of shakes out what kids are going to do.
maybe the NIL factored everything into this. Maybe we'll find out that he got paid a lot of money to go to Eastern Michigan, but maybe not. Maybe it was purely a decision of where he wanted to go. I don't know. Sticking to the college side of things, we talked about Arch Manning committing to Texas, and since he has, the recruits have been pouring in for Steve Sarkisian there in Texas. Not a surprise, right, that you sign one of the most well-known quarterbacks in the nation, the number one ranked quarterback in the nation, the highest ranked quarterback in the nation. Only 3 quarterbacks ever rated this high coming out of high school: Quinn Ewers, who's at Texas, and Vince Young, who went to Texas. So Arch Manning is there, and he is bringing a lot of guys with him. How much does one recruit signing truly impact? You talked about the NIL stuff. It seems like Arch Manning had a bigger impact than NIL had with getting these Texas recruits.
Well, I know in years past it made a big difference. If they could, one, it was important for a college, to get an elite player, but then to get an elite player who would go out and get one early, like Arch is, and then him go out and try to recruit other people to come with him. That's always been a very positive thing for schools, and that was one of the advantages of anytime they can get someone to sign early. And I know there's been other schools and other players that once they signed, then that really helped them get other players at the school. And Texas, is really in the right spot. It's funny because, they really didn't do well last year, but now they've had a fairly good recruiting year. And with this, there's a lot to look forward to in the years to come. I assume most of these recruits will come in the class that he's in also, so it'll be very interesting. Again, not surprising at all, especially a guy with Arch Manning. And again, with all the publicity he would have, but the influence that his family would have, I think a lot would factor into that.
Yeah, I think it would as well. And the thing with football, you got to remember too, is it takes a little bit of time, right? Because even these guys coming in as freshmen, they're not all going to be ready to go as freshmen. And so it's going to take 2 or 3 years for that class to really be effective. So you're going to have to be patient with Sarkisian. Now, the transfer portal changes that a little bit, where you can bring in guys to plug and play. But overall, if I had to put money on Texas, I'd put it on them in 3 years versus next year or even the year after, as Quinn Ewers will be the quarterback this year, so we assume, and maybe even the year after that as well. Texas still currently in the Big 12. Not that much longer. They'll be moving to the SEC. But the Big 12 is looking to hire Brett Yormark. He is as the next commissioner for the Big 12. ESPN reported, others did as well. But he is currently the COO of Jay-Z's Rock Nation. So kind of pulling from a different area, I guess, than what you think of for commissioners. But in the day and age of the NIL, you want someone who is very understanding of culture and how things are going and in touch, especially in the marketing side of things, not just for the NIL stuff, but for the conference as a whole. Because this conference, Dan, is kind of reshaping things, right? They're bringing in new teams. Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida will join next year. So this Big 12 move is intriguing, I think, to see the direction they're going with their commissioner choice.
No, I agree with you on that, and I think it's very wise. I mean, if the Big 12 is going to survive, because they're losing a lot of their big name, schools with Oklahoma and Texas. So if they're going to survive, they're going to have to think a little bit outside the box and do things outside the box. So to get a commissioner that can be creative and comes from a little bit of a different, different genre probably is wise. And again, it's like everything in sports. If this works, other conferences may look at seeing, who they need to lead them. I don't know that any commissioners are worried right now, but I think it's going to, every conference is going to have to look at things, until the NCAA changes or until they make this big mega football conference, which I think may happen sometime. Right now, for a conference to stay viable, seem like bringing in a guy that will have new ideas, probably a good thing.
I agree. Let's talk quickly about the NHL. Sorry, Jason. Didn't like our conversation about the NHL a week or so ago, but it's over. Colorado wins Game 6 to win the Stanley Cup. I think that's their third Stanley Cup. And young team, they dent the Stanley Cup in their celebration. Still on the ice. That's interesting. But any words you want to give to the parting NHL season?
Well, it's like I said, the Colorado was a very dominant force all year long, and I think I read where it was one of maybe one of the most dominant. There were some things that matched up probably with the Gretzky Oilers, back in the day. But Colorado really, they were strong all year long, and it's interesting because they got young talent. And even though while there is free agency and moves around a little bit in hockey, more than likely they can keep people together. And they do have a young team, and it'll be real interesting. I think it was good for the NHL. I think the NHL is doing much better, as you said, now that they're with ESPN, TNT. They have more. More publicity is helping them. And I think this run with a young team, I'm sure they'll use it greatly in promoting the season next season. Of course, they have their draft coming up here pretty quick. And I think it was an up year for the NHL. And, congratulations to the Avalanche. Tampa's had a real dominant run, and they very easily could have won. And, but congratulations to the Avalanche.
Yes, congratulations to the Avalanche. Let's go baseball. Big brawl. We won't spend too much time on that. It's been a couple of days now since that happened. Suspensions got handed down. Crazy fight, to be honest with you. A lot of craziness happened there. I don't remember if we talked. I guess we did. Did we talk about the brawl? I don't remember if it happened after we recorded on Sunday or before. So we won't talk much about that. Anything that stood out to you with the suspensions? Were you surprised by anything? I guess the manager got suspended the most. I think he got the harshest penalty for the Angels, but Nevin, I believe. And I don't know. Overall, it's a surprising event, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was that?
Anything that came from the suspensions that surprised you?
No, not really. Again, I think, that's something professional sports has to watch and has to curb. And, so I think baseball obviously doesn't want to get that started from there. Again, I don't know what all spawned it. I've heard that it could be something from, the day before, somebody getting Trout getting thrown at, or at least a pitch that was up high or whatever. But, and baseball's always had a little bit of a retaliation. But, yeah, they're going to have to, bench clearing brawls. But again, I heard the talk about that, and it's true. Baseball's a little bit of a different animal. If you say, well, okay, nobody can leave the dugout, well, then you're leaving one player out there potentially against 4 or 5 players from the infield. So it's a little bit different, and something they have to look at.
Well, maybe don't charge the mound if it's 1 against 9. It would be my take on that. Lots of injuries. Scherzer and DeGrom both in rehab right now, looking to get back soon. Bryce Harper, broken thumb, has surgery. Don't know when he'll be back yet either. What about Freddie Freeman? Interestingly enough, this would have been a good question to ask George Plaster, as he's a huge Braves fan. Freddie Freeman fires his representation, did not like the way things went in his transition to LA. Is Freddie Freeman regretting leaving Atlanta?
I don't know. That's what I wondered when I heard about this, and I wasn't able to hear much about it today. But when I saw that, I thought, he has to be the one that makes the final decision. So I don't know. Of course, he was back in Atlanta over the weekend and had a great reception there from the fans. And so I'm not sure what that was all about.
Can the Dodgers trade Freddie Freeman for Matt Olson? Can the Dodgers trade Freddie Freeman for Matt Olson?
Yeah, I don't know that they would do that. So you'd have to say, I think they got a good deal what they have right now.
Let's see here. Not a whole lot has changed in lieu of the standings in Major League Baseball. New York still absolutely crushing the American League East, 13 games up on Toronto. Toronto, Boston, and Tampa keep floating back and forth. Tampa actually is 2 behind Toronto right now. Minnesota leads the Central. Cleveland still there in second. The White Sox still just not being effective. Houston has the West under control. In the National League, Atlanta's catching New York, Dad. And look at that National League East. And now New York's about to get Scherzer and DeGrom back in the next, 2-3 weeks maybe. But Atlanta's been really, really tough. And they've got Albies out for a while. But I'm starting to think that maybe Atlanta wins this division over the Mets. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, we knew all along Atlanta was not going to stay where they were at. That'd be very interesting if they do, as far as from the New York fan base and the Mets, to have the team it looked like they had and to be in control. Even if it's just to be a close race, going to be very interesting because, in New York, fans are not tolerated real well, and you have the Yankees having a great year. So it'll be interesting if the Braves do catch them, but definitely it's going to be a race, at least a 2-team race over there, I think.
Milwaukee's in first again in the Central. I sent a thank you to 2 people today. We're recording this on Wednesday. I sent a thank you to Graham Wallace. He's a huge Toronto fan, and that's where Rowdy Tellez came from to Milwaukee. And then I also sent a thank you to Kevin Wilson, our fantasy baseball friend from Belly Up Sports, because this past week, Kevin Wilson dropped Rowdy Tellez in fantasy baseball. Since then, Rowdy Tellez has had two home run games. And so once Kevin let him get him off the roster, he was free to finally start playing well. So Rowdy Tellez having a huge week for Milwaukee. Thank you to Kevin for dropping him. Thank you to Graham for talking Toronto into trading him to Milwaukee last year. In the NL West, Dad, the Dodgers in the lead. San Diego only a game back. San Francisco has fallen into solid third place, 5.5 back there. This seems like a 2-headed monster, and San Diego's not healthy, Dad. Fernando Tatis is still not back. He's supposed to start swinging in the next week or two. And Machado's been out for several games as well, and San Diego's not falling at all. They're still staying right there with Los Angeles. Is San Diego going to win the West?
I mean, they could. You would think when they get, their players back, that'll add a lot, not only just a lot of talent to the lineup, but probably a lot of energy also from there and confidence. So I think the Padres definitely should be a factor and maybe able to take it from the Dodgers as it goes on. It'd be very interesting to watch.
Walker Buehler is out with an injury. Dad would know that because he has him on his fantasy team as well. But it's going to be interesting to see as we get towards the All-Star break and how things roll there in Major League Baseball to close out this season. Football news: Terry McLaurin, he is back. Signed his extension. He was holding out, but he is back now. So he got that signed. That's good news for the Commanders. They haven't had a whole lot of good news here recently, so they'll take that for sure. Deshaun Watson hearings continue. They'll be in their 3rd day of meetings on Thursday. Not a whole lot to talk about there. And then, Dad, the Baker Mayfield situation. I've heard from people who know things that he's going to Seattle, and I've heard from people who know things that he's going to Carolina. But he's still a Cleveland Brown as of today, even though he is not going to play for Cleveland. How long do we go before Baker Mayfield gets moved?
I would think, basically it just needs to be done before training camp now that we're in a dead period here. So, you've still got a couple weeks. But I would think, if one of those 2 teams were going to get him, then I think it would be, I would think it'd be settled a week or 2 before training camp at least, so he can start, getting into the system somewhat. Again, it's hard to tell where he's going to go. Like you said, people that know say one team, and then people that know say the other team, and it'd be anybody's guess. Probably a lot of it has to do, I guess, with the finances, whether they're going to get anybody. Because technically, Cleveland has to trade him. Is that correct? Or he's not really just a free agent, is he?
Not yet. They'd either have to release him or trade him.
Yeah. And so there's going to be some of, his salary. I think they want a team to take some of it. And so I don't know what the approach is there from either team. I think he could fit, with either team, would be a help with either one. And, it's definitely drug on. But I would think it'd be settled within a couple weeks of training camp. Would only make sense if he's going to go ahead and sign with one of them, or if he's going to wait and see what happens, what injuries or teams that look at other quarterbacks from there.
Yeah, I've heard that Cleveland is looking to unload half of his salary. So they're going to pay about $9 million and looking for the other team to pick up the other, I think it's $8 or $9 million. There as well. And then an interesting story, Dad. Cincinnati Bengals running back Trevion Williams, Ben Baby has a story on ESPN. He is going to be an adjunct professor at Texas A&M teaching on NIL to the students at Texas A&M. So he's teaching a course specifically on NIL. He was at A&M from 2016 to 2018. How much money did he receive in his time at college that he is so professional on how to teach on getting money while you're in college, do you think? Add that to the Jimbo Fisher topics, even though I don't think Fisher was there when Williams was there. Maybe he was for his last year. I don't remember what year Jimbo Fisher went to A&M, but that's an interesting concept, right, for an NFL player to come in and be an adjunct professor to teach a class on NIL.
Well, definitely colleges are going to keep doing more with it and giving more training. Yeah, that is interesting. That does make for an interesting question. Does he have experience in this, or has he just been, learning and wants to train them now? So that is a very interesting take on that. And it's interesting with everything that's happened with A&M and Alabama is they're bringing on an adjunct professor. But again, I'm sure Jimbo says, hey, this is just to help the kids when they get here because, there wasn't anything promised before except, this will give them an opportunity to really learn how this works.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. All right, Dad, that's all I got for today. Anything else that I missed that you want to talk about?
No, like I said, it was great having, George Plaster on. If we had him a little longer, we could have asked a lot of questions, but it was very interesting, the things he said about the Titans, because when I was still there in Tennessee, there were some real questions about things, how they were doing business, how things were going on, what the problems were. And I've wondered, has any of that changed? And I would, based on what I heard tonight, probably not a lot of it has, he was definitely right about the Marcus Mariota thing. Most other sports commentators in the area, tried to say, well, that was okay. He needed to be at home in Hawaii, but, you never saw him compared, and that was very interesting there. I know one problem the Titans were having was with their attendance when I was there. They had agreed to sell tickets to ticket brokers, and pretty consistently a third, half of the stadium was the other team's fans. And now maybe that's changed a little bit now because they've had better years, but that would have been interesting to find that out. But, George Plaster was always one that would say what he thought the problems were. And, some of them people would listen and was able to help, and other people did not. The Titans didn't. Vanderbilt never listened to him, and he was an alumni, could have helped them a lot. And just very, it was great to hear him again. He's quite the personality. If anybody ever listened to him, be good to watch him on TV. He has lots of great sayings. He has lots of things. I always remember him talking about the Raiders and Al Davis. He always talked about their slogan was a commitment to empty seats. And the logo was just litigate, baby. And he was constantly on that with the Raiders and Al Davis, and a very colorful guy.
Yeah, and you can watch him now, Dad. Actually, you can download the app and watch him starting July 11th for mainstream media TV there as well. I wanted to talk to him about Major League Baseball and the possibility of them coming to Nashville as well. So we'll work on getting him back on sometime down the road and try to ask a few more of these questions. But I sure appreciated him taking the time to come on. And again, when I think of local radio, I think of George Plaster, how it should be done. Our local media here in Lexington and even Richmond, they won't say anything that will hurt their chances of getting on somebody on their show, which in Lexington doesn't matter. You're not going to get on anybody from Kentucky anyhow. Coach Cal's not coming on your show. Stoops isn't coming on your show. But nonetheless, it's just a lot of butt kissing, basically, not a whole lot of actual content. So only one show I know of in Lexington that gives real content. That's Brad Taylor's show. And in Richmond, I really feel like, I know some people aren't going to like this, I feel like we're the only show that puts out real content in Richmond. So, take it or leave it. I don't know.
We're a lot like, I think, George Plaster in the fact that we're sports fans. To me, that was the thing about George. You watched him. I didn't have the same favorite teams he did. I didn't always agree with everything he said, but you knew he was a passionate sports fan. He loved sports. He loved talking about sports, and he came across that way. He wasn't saying something just to get ratings. He wasn't saying something one night and the next night saying the exact opposite. He was a fan, and he would give you his opinion from being a fan. And like you've said, you and I have always talked sports for years, and that's what we try to do on this show.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, my style, I guess, is shaped from George Plaster. A lot of it is, because that's who we listened to a lot, in the car, was George Plaster. And so a lot of kind of my vision for what this show is going to be is still kind of based off of what I heard growing up with George on the local radio. So again, thank you to George Plaster for coming on. I hope to get him on again sometime here down the road and talk more to him. I greatly respect him. And so appreciate him taking the time. I know he probably doesn't realize how much it means. It really is. It means a lot. So appreciate that. Dad, we are starting Sunday. Will be season 3 of the Sports Stove podcast. Started right before the pandemic. 2020 started the new year and said, all right, here we go. We're going to do a sports talk podcast. And then the whole world shut down and there was nothing to talk about. But we have made it through that. We made it through 2021. And as we kind of come into the midpoint of the year, now we transition into the fall sports, football specifically coming up. And so we are going to transition. We've got new segments coming for season 3, new stuff going on with the local hour, new sponsor, lots of fun stuff happening. So tune in Sunday as we kick off season 3, where we're talking NBA. We've got an NBA guest coming on with us as well. So we'll get into that. Then local hour, Sports Stove local hour starts up this coming Wednesday. We'll be live. Let's see here. I think we'll be live Tuesday night. It'll drop Wednesday morning. The podcast will. And we'll be on Belly Up TV on Wednesday morning as well, where we start our position breakdown for EKU football. And really looking forward to getting back into the local hour. Haven't done that for the month of June. So we're back into it. And again, introducing new sponsors, discounts on pizza. It's going to be a great time. So tune into that. I need to thank Belly Up Sports, by the way. Been with Belly Up Sports now for almost 2 years. And their support and encouragement has been felt and appreciated. And so we're still with them. Belly Up Sports, Belly Up Media. And you can find us on Belly Up TV every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. And, of course, the podcast wherever you get it. Follow us on social media, Instagram and Twitter at Sports Stove. And then don't forget to go to intheclutch.com and get yourself a t-shirt. Use the code SPORTSSTOVE and you get 10% off your purchase there as well. All right. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode and to all of Season 2's episodes. If you missed any of this episode, make sure you go back and listen on YouTube or podcast platforms. And we will see you in Season 3 coming up next week. Thank you for listening. And until next time, we'll